Now imagine this doesn't happen in a studio or a clean demo video. Imagine it happens on an ordinary day when nothing is staged and everything is slightly inconvenient. You put these glasses on in the morning because you plan to wear them all day. That's when the real test begins. Not in the first 5 minutes, but in the first 5 hours. And this is where the rivalry stops feeling abstract and starts following you around like a question you can't ignore. You step outside. Sunlight hits the lenses. With Meta Ray-Ban, nothing changes visually. The world looks exactly like it always has. That's comforting, almost reassuring. It feels safe because your eyes remain untouched by technology. The glasses are there, but they're not talking back to your vision. With Rokid X3 Pro, something subtle happens. Not dramatic, not flashy. Just a quiet reminder that information lives closer to your eyes now. And whether you find that exciting or distracting depends on what kind of day you're having. That's the part nobody can decide for you. Here's where suspense creeps in slowly. You get a notification. With Meta Ray-Ban, you hear it. A brief sound, maybe a spoken message, depending on how you use it. You're still looking at the world the same way. With Rokid X3 Pro, the notification shows up visually, small, controlled. It doesn't hijack your attention, but it does demand acknowledgement. And once that starts happening regularly, your relationship with information changes. You don't wonder if something happened, immediately. And that knowledge is powerful. And slightly dangerous. Because here's the thing nobody advertises clearly enough. Visual information feels faster than audio. Even when it isn't, your brain processes it differently. With audio, you listen, interpret, and react. With visuals, you glance, register, and move on. That difference sounds minor, but over the course of a day, it adds up. And once you get used to it, going back feels like something is missing. But wait, this is exactly where Meta Ray-Ban plays its strongest card: mental calm. Because with fewer visual interruptions, your attention stays anchored in the real world. You hear notifications when you choose to. You capture moments when you decide to. Nothing sneaks into your vision uninvited. That restraint is intentional. And for a lot of people, especially those already overwhelmed by screens, it feels like relief. Now hold on to that thought, because the rivalry isn't about which approach is better. It's about which approach people can live with longer. Rokid X3 Pro asks a quiet question every time information appears. Do you want help right now? Meta Ray-Ban asks a different one. Do you want to stay out of it until you ask? Those questions shape habits. And habits shape markets. Let me take you somewhere familiar. A grocery store. Fluorescent lights, crowded aisles, people stopping suddenly in front of shelves. With Meta Ray-Ban, you're just wearing glasses. You might be listening to music. You might take a call. You're moving through the space the way you always do. With Rokid X3 Pro, the experience has potential to feel guided. Not because it forces guidance, but because it's capable of showing context when needed. That capability alone changes expectations. Even if you don't use it every moment, you know it's there. And knowing something is available alters how often you reach for it. Now, here comes the tension point. Most reviews skip fatigue, not battery fatigue, mental fatigue. Visual overlays, even minimal ones, create a low-level demand on attention. Not enough to feel overwhelming at first. But after hours? That's where preferences crystallize. Some users feel empowered, others feel drained. And the scary part for Meta is this: that difference won't show up in spec sheets. It will show up in long-term behavior. Meta Ray-Ban avoids that risk by avoiding visual complexity altogether. But avoiding risk also avoids opportunity. Rokid X3 Pro accepts the risk in exchange for capability. And neither approach is wrong, but they cannot converge without compromise. That's the problem. And we're not even at the biggest one yet. Let's talk about cameras again. But from a different angle: privacy. Meta Ray-Ban's cameras are discreet. People often don't realize they're being used. That's controversial, but it's also part of why people wear them. Rokid X3 Pro looks more technical. It signals intention. When you use it, people notice. That changes social dynamics instantly. In some environments, that's a deal breaker. In others, it's transparency. And here's the uncomfortable truth: users will self-select based on where they spend their time. Offices, classrooms, streets, homes. Now imagine content creation. With Meta Ray-Ban, recording feels natural, it feels like memory capture. With Rayneo X3 Pro, recording feels integrated into a system. And that difference matters when you're editing later. One feels like life as it happened. The other feels like life with context layered on top. And creators will have to choose which story they want to tell. But stop, because before you pick sides, we need to talk about battery behavior, not numbers. Behavior. Meta Ray-Ban behaves predictably. You know roughly how long it lasts based on audio and camera use? You build trust. Rayneo X3 Pro introduces variability. Displays demand energy. Visual usage fluctuates. And unpredictability creates anxiety. Not constant anxiety, but just enough to check in on it. And the moment you start checking a device, it owns a little more of your attention. This is the moment where suspense tightens again. Because Meta's advantage has never been raw capability. It's emotional comfort. You trust it. You don't think about it. And trust, once earned, is hard to steal. But Rayneo X3 Pro isn't trying to steal trust. It's trying to earn curiosity. And curiosity spreads faster than trust. Now picture someone new to smart glasses, a teenager, or a retiree, or someone who just wants help navigating a new city. Which experience do they gravitate toward? The one that fades into the background, or the one that actively assists? The answer depends on what they expect technology to do for them. And expectations change over time, slowly, quietly, then all at once. Here's where Meta faces the real problem. They can't simply add displays without changing the soul of the product. Displays change weight, they change heat. They change perception. Ray-Ban as a brand stands for style and familiarity. Rayneo stands for function and advancement. Those brand identities are not interchangeable. Meta chose its lane carefully. But now that another lane exists, comparison becomes inevitable. And comparisons are dangerous because they invite questions like, why can't my glasses do that? Not because it's missing, but because it's choosing not to. And consumers are terrible at forgiving intentional limits once they've tasted alternatives. Now let me slow this down again, because the story doesn't end with defeat or victory. It ends with division. Some people will always prefer Meta Ray-Ban because it respects their attention. Others will lean toward Rayneo X3 Pro because it augments their perception. And that split creates something the smart glasses market has never truly had before. Categories. Until now, smart glasses lived in a narrow space. Capture, audio, connectivity. Rayneo X3 Pro stretches that space visually. And once space stretches, it doesn't snap back. It stays open. And Meta has to decide whether it follows or holds the line. And here's the final suspense beat I want to leave you with before this section ends. Neither product is wrong. Neither product fails. But only one of them defines what smart glasses mean next. And the uncomfortable truth for Meta is that meaning is no longer theirs alone, because once users start seeing information instead of just hearing it, it's very hard to unsee it, and that's exactly why this rivalry is only getting started. By the time lunchtime arrives, something interesting has already happened. Even if you haven't consciously noticed it yet, your relationship with the glasses has settled into a rhythm. And rhythm is where the truth lives. Not in first impressions. Not in spec sheets. In the tiny, repeated moments that decide whether a device becomes part of your life or slowly ends up forgotten in a drawer. You sit down somewhere noisy, a cafe, a food court. Maybe a small restaurant where plates clink and conversations overlap. With Meta Ray-Ban, the experience stays predictable. The open-ear audio lets voices pass through naturally. You can hear music softly, but the world doesn't disappear. That balance is intentional. It's designed so you never feel cut off, never feel awkward. You're still present. And presence, especially in public, is one of the strongest reasons. People keep wearing these glasses day after day. Now watch what changes when Rayneo X3 Pro stays on your face through the same moment. The audio still works. The world is still audible. But there's another layer quietly available. Visual information can appear when needed. Not all the time. Not aggressively. Just enough to remind you that this isn't only an accessory, it's an interface. And the longer that interface stays with you, the more your brain starts leaning on it. Here's where suspense creeps in again, because this reliance doesn't feel like dependence. It feels like convenience. And convenience is the most persuasive force in consumer technology. You don't notice it forming. You just notice discomfort when it's gone. Picture a simple task. Checking a message while your hands are busy. With Meta Ray-Ban, the message arrives through audio. It's read aloud, you listen, interpret, and decide whether to respond. That process is natural, but it takes time. With Rainio X3 Pro, the message appears visually. You glance, you instantly know whether it matters. And that instant matters more than it should. Because once your brain realizes it can assess importance without interrupting your flow, it starts craving that speed. But pause right there, because speed always demands payment. Visual attention costs energy. Even if the display is small, even if it's subtle. Over hours, your eyes work harder. Some people won't mind. Others will feel it. And this is where personal tolerance shapes loyalty. Meta Ray-Ban, by refusing to play in the visual space, avoids that entire equation. There's no eye fatigue from overlays. No brightness adjustment anxiety, no concern about visual clutter. The glasses respect your vision by leaving it alone. That sounds almost philosophical, but it shows up in real life. You finish the day feeling like you wore glasses, not a device. Rainio X3 Pro gives you something else. The feeling of capability. You're not just connected, you're informed. You're assisted. And that feeling can be intoxicating. But intoxicating things require moderation. And moderation depends on the user, not the hardware. Now let's take this out of public spaces and into movement. Walking, commuting, crossing streets. This is where smart glasses quietly prove what they're worth. With Meta Ray-Ban, navigation guidance lives in your ear. Turn-by-turn instructions arrive calmly. You still look around, you still interpret. The glasses guide, but they don't lead. And for many people, that feels respectful. You're still in charge. With Rainio X3 Pro, navigation becomes visual. And this is where the experience shifts in a way that's hard to forget. When information appears in your field of view, it reduces cognitive translation. You're not converting words into direction, you're following cues. That sounds small. It isn't. Over the course of a long walk, that difference saves mental energy. And saved energy gets noticed, even subconsciously. But here's the twist nobody expects. That same visual help can also make you less aware. When guidance appears in front of you, you trust it. When guidance is spoken, you stay alert. Meta Ray-Ban keeps you mentally engaged with your surroundings. Rainio X3 Pro risks becoming a crutch if you let it. And again, the glasses don't force anything, but they allow it. An allowance shapes behavior. Now imagine traveling, airports, trains, new cities. This is where the rivalry sharpens. Meta Ray-Ban shines in long wear. You can keep them on through security lines, waiting areas, long conversations. They don't demand interaction. They wait patiently. Rainio X3 Pro becomes more situational. In moments where information matters, it feels powerful. In moments where nothing matters, it feels like potential unused. And potential unused is weight mental if not physical. Now let me tell you where suspense spikes hardest. Decision fatigue. Every time information can appear visually, your brain subconsciously decides whether to engage. That micro-decision repeats hundreds of times. Meta Ray-Ban removes that burden. By removing the option entirely. Rainio X3 Pro gives you the option, and options are exhausting over time. But here's the part that makes this rivalry truly dangerous for Meta. Younger users don't fear options. They expect them. They grow up with layered interfaces. Multiple streams of information feel normal. Silence feels empty. For them, visual assistance isn't intrusive, it's expected. And that generational shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens quietly. One user at a time. Now step into content creation again, because this is where market perception forms early. Creators don't just use devices, they demonstrate them. Meta Ray-Ban footage feels intimate, natural, first-person memories. Rainio X3 Pro content feels analytical, guided, contextual. Both are real, both are valid. But one suggests the future more loudly than the other. And the future is contagious. At this point, you might be thinking, so why wouldn't everyone just choose visuals? Because life isn't always about maximizing data. Sometimes it's about minimizing friction. And Meta Ray-Ban's biggest strength is that it rarely asks anything of you. It works when needed and disappears when not. That design philosophy earns loyalty the slow way. Rainio X3 Pro earns fascination the fast way. And here's where the rivalry becomes a problem instead of a comparison. Because Meta cannot easily borrow what makes Rainio compelling without sacrificing what makes Ray-Ban wearable. Displays change everything. Weight distribution, frame thickness, heat dissipation, aesthetics, social comfort. Meta doesn't avoid displays because they don't understand them. They avoid them because they understand the cost. Rainio accepts that cost because it values function over invisibility. And as long as both exist, consumers will face a choice they didn't have before. Do you want glasses that stay out of your way or glasses that step in when needed? And that choice doesn't end at purchase. It repeats every day you wear them. Some days you'll crave simplicity. Other days you'll crave assistance. And no single product fully satisfies both urges at once. That tension is the heart of the problem. Because Meta Ray-Ban succeeds best when no one expects more from smart glasses. Rainio X3 Pro succeeds by raising expectations just enough to make audio-only solutions feel limited, not obsolete, but incomplete. And here's the cliffhanger that carries us forward. As AI behavior becomes more integrated, not smarter, not more speculative, just more present, the question stops being, what can these glasses do? And becomes, where does that information belong, in your ears or in your eyes? Meta has chosen one answer, Rainio has chosen the other. And once that question enters the mainstream, it doesn't go away. By the time evening approaches, something subtle but important starts to happen. The excitement wears off, the novelty fades. And what's left is the quiet truth of long-term wear. This is the hour where smart glasses either prove they belong in your life or quietly start negotiating their exit. You're tired. Not exhausted, just done for the day. And when you're tired, you become brutally honest with your tech. Anything unnecessary starts feeling heavy. Anything demanding attention feels louder than it did in the morning. This is when Meta Ray-Ban leans back into its biggest advantage. Without trying at all. You're still wearing them, and they still feel like glasses. Not a reminder, not a responsibility. Just something that exists when you need it and disappears when you don't. Now contrast that with Rainio X3 Pro at the same hour. The day's visual interactions have added up. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way you complain about online. Just enough that you're aware of your eyes. Just enough that you notice when information appears, even briefly. And this is where personal limits quietly assert themselves. For some users, this is still empowering. For others, it's the first moment they think, maybe not all the time. And that moment matters more than specs ever will, because long-term adoption isn't about what a device can do at its best. It's about how it feels at its worst. When you're tired, when you're distracted, when you just want things to stop asking questions. Meta Ray-Ban is built around that reality. It doesn't ask much of you. It doesn't change how you see the world. It only changes what you can hear and record. And that boundary is intentional. It protects your attention. Rainio X3 Pro pushes closer to that boundary. It doesn't cross it aggressively, but it approaches it confidently. And proximity creates tension. Let's talk about battery behavior again, but from a human perspective. Not numbers. Feelings. With Meta Ray-Ban, battery anxiety is straightforward. You know that heavy camera use drains it faster. You learn that rhythm quickly. With Rainio X3 Pro, usage patterns are more complex. Displays require energy. Visual usage fluctuates. And fluctuation breeds uncertainty. You check in. You think about it. And the moment you think about battery instead of life, something shifts. That doesn't mean Rainio fails. It means it asks more awareness from the user. And awareness is a limited resource. Now, picture the moment you take the glasses off at night. This sounds small, but it's not. With Meta Ray-Ban, taking them off feels like setting glasses down. With Rainio X3 Pro, taking them off feels like ending a session. And sessions imply effort. Effort implies choice. Choice invites comparison. And here's where the rivalry becomes dangerous for Meta in a very specific way. Rainio X3 Pro reframes what smart glasses are mentally. They're not just wearable accessories. They're computing moments. You put them on to do something. Meta Ray-Ban resists that framing. They're meant to be worn first and used second. That philosophical difference shapes how people talk about them, review them, recommend them, and imagine their future. Now let me walk you through a moment that feels boring but decides everything. Sitting on the couch, TV on, phone nearby. Nothing urgent happening. With Meta Ray-Ban, you might forget you're wearing them. That's the design working perfectly. With Rayneo X3 Pro, you're aware they're there, even if nothing is happening. And awareness without purpose becomes friction. This is where minimalism wins hearts quietly. But minimalism also risks becoming stagnant. Because as soon as someone experiences visual assistance solving a real problem, like understanding directions instantly or checking important info without stopping, that memory sticks. Even if they choose minimalism later, they now know what's possible. And knowing what's possible rewires expectations permanently. Now let's talk about AI behavior, but carefully, because we're staying strictly real. Meta Ray-Ban integrates with phone-based AI assistance through audio. You ask, you receive answers through sound. It feels like talking to someone walking beside you. Rayneo X3 Pro presents AI-supported information visually. It feels like reading helpful notes placed gently into your view. Same intention, different delivery. And delivery changes trust. Audio feels conversational. Visual feels authoritative. When you hear something, you weigh it. When you see something, you register it as fact faster. That difference is subtle, but it shapes how people rely on information. And reliance is the slippery slope. No company fully controls. Meta limits that reliance by keeping information out of sight. Rayneo invites reliance by making information visible. Neither approach is unethical, neither is careless. They're just betting on different interpretations of human behavior. And here's where suspense thickens. Because Meta can't ignore this forever. As visual-first experiences normalize, audio-only designs risk feeling like an interim solution, even if they're perfect at what they do. That's not a failure of Meta Ray-Ban. It's a consequence of exposure. You can't unlearn a better way to do something, even if the old way still works. But here's the counterpunch. Not everyone wants better in the same sense. Some people want calmer, simpler, quieter. And Meta Ray-Ban delivers that consistently. It doesn't chase maximum capability. It chases maximum wearability. And wearability is what keeps devices on faces instead of shelves. Rayneo X3 Pro lives closer to the edge. Closer to possibility, closer to change. And devices that live at the edge either reshape the market or exhaust it. There's very little middle ground. Now, consider families, kids, older users, multi-generational households. Meta Ray-Ban fits into these spaces easily. It doesn't scare anyone. It doesn't need explanation. Rayneo X3 Pro invites curiosity but also concern. What does it show? When does it show it? How much control do I have? These are reasonable questions. And reasonable questions slow adoption, but they don't stop it. They filter it, and filtered adoption often creates devoted users instead of mass ones. Here's the part that keeps product managers awake at night. Meta Ray-Ban thrives in mass adoption. Rayneo X3 Pro thrives in niche excellence. And history shows us that niches often become norms over time. Not always, but often enough to be dangerous. And here's the quiet irony. Meta has more resources, more AI research, more ecosystem reach, but Rayneo has freedom. Freedom to push visuals without worrying about breaking a fashion brand legacy. Freedom to accept trade-offs openly. Freedom to say, this isn't for everyone. Meta can't say that. Meta Ray-Ban has to be for everyone or at least look like it. Now pause and feel that tension. One product is carefully designed to offend no one. The other is designed to excite someone. And excitement spreads faster than comfort, even if comfort lasts longer. So where does that leave us as the night ends? It leaves us with two different emotional memories of the same day. Meta Ray-Ban leaves you feeling undisturbed. Rayneo X3 Pro leaves you feeling assisted. Neither feeling is wrong. But one of them feels more like progress, especially the people who equate progress with visible change. And that's the danger zone for Meta. Because markets don't move based on what feels good today. They move based on what feels inevitable tomorrow. The next morning is where the answer actually reveals itself. Not in a review, not in a comment section, not in a spec comparison. It reveals itself in one unspoken decision. Which glasses do you reach for without thinking? This moment doesn't feel dramatic. There's no music cue. No internal monologue. You're half awake, your day hasn't started yet, and your brain is running on instinct. That's the most honest moment technology ever gets with a human being. Because in that first moment, before you've scanned your messages or looked at notifications, the glasses themselves whisper a question without words. Do you need me today? Or can you go without me? And how you answer even subconsciously says everything. If your hand goes to Meta Ray-Ban, it's not because it's smarter, it's because it feels effortless. You already know what the day will be like with it on. Your vision remains untouched. Your attention stays yours. The glasses don't promise to help you conquer the world. They promise not to bother you while you live in it. And that promise carries weight. It's subtle, almost invisible. You put them on and the world feels uninterrupted. You feel free to move, to focus, to breathe. The weight on your nose disappears from thought within minutes. And because they are just like the Ray-Bans you've worn for years, people don't even notice you're wearing smart tech. That quiet blending into everyday life is more powerful than any flashy display or overt feature. It's the kind of intimacy with technology that quietly earns loyalty. Even before you've experienced all its capabilities, if your hand goes to Ranio X3 Pro, it's for a different reason entirely. It's because you anticipate needing help. Information, guidance, context. You expect the day to throw situations at you where seeing data will save time, reduce friction, or prevent confusion. You're choosing capability over quiet. And that choice feels intentional. The glasses feel alive in a different way, ready to assist rather than fade away. You already imagine them highlighting directions, offering subtle visual cues, overlaying notifications when you need them, without you having to pull your phone from your pocket. That anticipation, that silent promise of augmented guidance, is compelling. And it's the kind of pull that shifts habits before you even notice it. You start the day knowing your eyes have access to tools that others don't. You feel sharper, faster, more in control, but with that control comes a subtle tension. The glasses are not invisible. They remind you that information is always nearby. And that proximity changes perception over time. Here's the suspenseful truth that makes this rivalry so dangerous for Meta. Both instincts are correct. And once both instincts exist in the same market, smart glasses stops being a single idea. What defines a smart glass? Is it something that stays invisible until you choose to use it, or is it something that steps in quietly, offering guidance when needed? Until now, Meta Ray-Ban defines smart glasses as something you wear all the time, not something you activate, not something you manage, something that stays out of the way unless invited in. That philosophy works because it aligns with how most people already treat glasses. You don't think about them. You just put them on. And that invisibility is exactly why millions of people have embraced them. They offer technological enhancement without disrupting human behavior. Ranio X3 Pro challenges that definition. It treats smart glasses like a tool you choose when you want added intelligence in your line of sight. That's not passive. That's deliberate. And deliberate tools tend to evolve faster than passive accessories. Because once users experience a layer of visual guidance, their brains start reorganizing how they interact with the world. A glance is no longer just a glance. It becomes a calculated moment of input. Decisions that used to take fractions of a second now feel informed, supported, and slightly altered. That shift is invisible to the naked eye, but the cumulative effect changes expectations. And once expectations shift, the market notices. Now here's the moment where the bigger problem clicks into place. Meta cannot simply absorb this idea without losing its core advantage. The second Meta Ray-Ban introduces visual overlays. It stops being invisible. It stops being just Ray-Bans. And the second it loses that, it competes directly with every other wearable display device on the planet on weight, on heat, on battery, on bulk. That's a challenge invisible in numbers but glaring in daily life. You put on glasses expecting effortless wear, and suddenly there's a screen flicker in your vision. Your nose feels heavier. You subconsciously anticipate notifications. That tiny shift changes how often you reach for them, how long you leave them on, and how much trust you place in the device. Ranio X3 Pro doesn't have to worry about losing invisibility because it never promised it. It accepts trade-offs openly. It shows capability visually, embraces the design, and asks users to live with the consequences. Heavier frame, subtle warmth from electronics, a presence you can't ignore. And because it embraces these trade-offs, It can innovate in areas Meta cannot touch without compromising its own design philosophy. That asymmetry is brutal. It's not just about which device is better at one task. It's about which philosophy aligns with human habits and expectations. One device promises quiet consistency. The other promises active assistance. Both strategies are valid. Both succeed. But the divergence creates tension that the market cannot ignore. Let's talk about long-term trust. Meta Ray-Ban builds trust by consistency. Day after day, it behaves the same. You know what you're getting. You trust that it will not disrupt your perception, not draw unwanted attention, and not demand cognitive resources. That trust is emotional, subtle, and cumulative. Renio X3 Pro builds trust by capability. When you need it, it shows up with information. And that kind of trust feels stronger in moments of stress, navigation errors, language confusion in a foreign city, sudden changes in plans. When something helps you out of a problem, your memory encodes the solution vividly. Meta Ray-Ban doesn't fail. It simply doesn't intervene in those moments. Renio does. And those experiences stick. And yet, here comes the twist: humans don't live in constant problem-solving mode. Most of life is in between moments. Waiting at traffic lights, sitting in a cafe, walking through hallways, standing in line. And in those moments, minimalism wins. Because the fewer demands on your senses, the more relaxed you feel. Meta Ray-Ban shines in these intervals. You forget it's even there. You move, speak, and interact without realizing a device is on your face. Renio X3 Pro introduces a quiet tension because information is always potentially visible. Even when the display is idle, your mind knows it could appear. That awareness is subtle, cumulative, and over a day tiring. So which one wins? That question doesn't have a single answer. And that's the real problem. Because the market now contains both experiences simultaneously. Meta Ray-Ban is built for the average day, the routine, the passive user. Renio X3 Pro is built for demanding days, for information-heavy environments, for users who want active assistance layered onto their perception. And as our lives get busier, more connected, and more information-intensive, these demanding days become more common. That doesn't mean everyone will switch immediately. It means everyone starts wondering. And once you start wondering, loyalty loosens. Now let's talk about social signals. Because this is where adoption lives or dies, Meta Ray-Ban passes socially. People don't notice it. They don't ask what it's showing you. They don't feel watched. That subtlety is an invisible form of social insurance. Renio X3 Pro, by contrast, invites conversation. Curiosity, sometimes suspicion. People notice when it's on. They ask about its functions. They speculate on what you can see. And right now, society still prefers invisible tech over expressive tech when it's worn on the face. But those preferences shift as exposure increases. Smartphones were once intrusive. Bluetooth earbuds were once rude. Now they're normal. And normalization doesn't require perfection, it requires presence. Renio X3 Pro doesn't need to outsell Meta Ray-Ban to be dangerous. It only needs to exist convincingly, and it does. Because once users see what visual guidance in their line of sight can do, the mental benchmark changes. Meta Ray-Ban feels safer, quieter, and more passive, but the comparison exists silently. Once people know a better, or at least a different option exists, the passive option risks being perceived as limited, even if it's still technically excellent. Here's the final layer of suspense. Meta has an ecosystem advantage: phones, apps, services, integration across a platform millions already trust. Renio competes at the device level, standalone. That means Meta can afford to wait longer to react, but waiting has a cost. Because once users experience visual assistance, asking them to give it up feels like asking them to go backward. And backwards in human perception always feels like loss. Even if the device is the same quality. Meta Ray-Ban feels like the smartest glasses that don't get in your way. Renio X3 Pro feels like the simplest glasses that do something new with your eyes. One protects attention. The other expands perception. And that philosophical divergence is invisible in a chart, but undeniable in experience. And here's the ending you don't expect. This rivalry doesn't end with a winner and a loser. It ends with a split definition of intelligence. Quiet intelligence. versus visible intelligence, passive help versus active guidance. And whichever definition aligns with cultural momentum will shape what comes next. For Meta, the big problem isn't competition. It's expectation drift. The moment users begin to associate smart with visual, Meta Ray-Ban becomes a conservative choice, even if it's still excellent. And excellence is not always enough when the definition of progress shifts. When perception itself evolves, the safe option can start to feel limited. And human perception drives markets faster than specs ever could. So when people say Meta Ray-Ban finally has a real rival, they're not talking about sales numbers or specs. They're talking about philosophy, about what role technology should play in your senses, about whether smart glasses are meant to disappear or to inform. And that debate has officially left the lab and entered daily life, every commute, every meeting, every stroll, every family outing. Each small interaction becomes a subtle referendum on what kind of intelligence you expect in your wearable technology, which means the next generation of smart glasses won't just be better. They'll be decided, not by specs, not by marketing, not by hype, but by what people reach for instinctively when their day begins, by what they trust with their eyes, their attention, their perception. And now that you've seen both paths, clearly, the only real question left is which one feels more like the future when you put them on tomorrow morning. And that choice. That's the problem Meta can't ignore anymore.